RPG with DBJ. Creatives community, kind folks out there, thank you for joining us today on our weekly talk. This time we're talking about giants. Yeah, giants and all things massive and huge in our RPG tabletop role-playing games. As you can see by the thumbnail in the video, we are talking about Titans, Kaiju, Mecha, all those things in between, and how to implement them. Now, today is Discord Tuesday, which is kind of a grab bag. I've been defaulting to kind of talking about gaming mechanics on today, but we'll definitely bring up many other things. And for those who don't know, this show is simulcast on the audio over Discord at Fantasy Grounds College, Twitch, and YouTube, so you can participate in any or all or combination thereof if you wish. And let's get this party started. So yesterday on Monster Monday, we we devolved, but we talked about a lot of things about giants. One of the rather most disgusting things are humanoid giants participating in things like ourselves, but like humanity ourselves, but just writ very large. And we can be pretty, if we were, I don't know, a foot tall, 6 inches tall, and had to survive in a world with us, it would be pretty nasty and pretty disgusting. And while we were having some fun with it, there are some things that we can pull from it, I think, as far as using giants in a world. Now, when we say giants, we're going to really default more to humanoid styled giants before we get into things like kaiju type monsters that are, it's possible for them to be bipedal, but they may not be humanoid in nature. A supermassive giant spider is an example of that, or a giant moth, or a giant atomic breathing crocodile, or something of that nature. Yep. Pillar says, got to get your grabbing rules in. Hell yeah. Being picked up, throwing, etc. Height differences, like running through their legs. I absolutely agree with that. This is one of the hardest parts to simulate in a role-playing game, with like the ability to embrace the narrative and then apply some gaming statistics into it without punishing the players for doing it is pretty difficult in a lot of tabletop role-playing games. And if it doesn't lend itself towards cinematic action, it can be pretty brutal on the player characters to do the things that we imagine them and the players imagining themselves doing. Pelora is getting off on the right track here, especially things like grabbing onto something large and trying to climb up on them, or leaping from a high vantage point on top of a very massive individual. And of course, and I'm sure all of you are thinking of various, and I always bring up television shows, books, movies, graphic novels, and things of that nature. And it's the idea of leaping from a castle wall or a tower or a flying mount even, and or even a mountain cliff, and leaping down on top of a monster, on top of like a giant or something. That giant picking up, having the ability to like one-handedly pick up a person and either squeeze them or throw them to the ground or toss them very far away is another thing that doesn't seem to be a gaming, like a gaming attribute that giants have, but they would absolutely do it. And also, with the height differences, of course, comes a little bit of vulnerability from the player characters, based on the gaming system. But also, like Pelora brings up, running with the height differences, you can run through their legs. There are places to hide that larger creatures can't. If you yourself were in the movie Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, and the humans were going after you, you could jump under couches and run behind refrigerators and things like that to gain yourself some kind of advantage, both uppercase and lowercase advantage against these bigger, larger creatures, especially using things like tight spaces. And I know we are absolutely positively flowing from here into Third Pillar Thursday, where I talk about the environment. But I think I think gaming statistic wise, they both count, right? You know, a giant that stands, stomps their foot down on a PC, or grabs their hand and slams them up, lifts them up 20 feet and slams them up against a wall, or attempts to grab some large item and either crush them or trap them in it, pretty much works. Um, yeah, Pelorus is just thinking about the Oliphant from Lord of the Rings, with Legolas climbing climbing up it and sorting it and its riders out. Not humanoid giants, but it's a giant creature. Absolutely. And even thinking about that, like, there are even, you could get stung by a bee and there's a place on your body you can't reach with your hands naturally. You would have to rub against a wall, or grab a back scratcher, or, you know, remove your clothing to try to swat at it with a towel or something. And I understand that a lot of that is like one-off actions. You know, how often, what would be the chances of a player character getting to that one spot on the back of a giant and that giant can't reach you? Well, I don't know. We do have dice, and dice are able to modulate successes and failures, if you know. Uh, yep. Yeah, Pelora, I still remember that line where Gimli is like, that still counts as one. He takes out the elephant. I don't know, two dozen enemy combatants riding on the back of the big giant, um, you know, 5 times larger mammoth creature used in war or something. Yeah, it's pretty nasty. And let's remember, when we saw that scene in the Lord of the Rings, there were lots of allies getting crushed under the foot of these super humongous giant creatures. And if you could time out your pathway, you could avoid the falling foot, even if you're that small. So there could be I guess this is a combination for Third Pillar Thursday, but um, if you had a battle map, or you were able to describe to your players, like, hey, listen, every time this thing takes a step on a specific initiative or location or something, like, you're going to either have to move out of the way, or and time your move, or make a saving throw or something every time this thing steps down, to avoid its crushing, crushing footstep, or even forcing a spending of a resource to do it. Like, you're going to have to save a piece of your, one of your actions, or a piece of your movement, or something like that, or else you're going to get crushed. And that might be the difference between, I'm going to fire my archer's going to fire a couple of arrows, or going to have to reduce the number of arrows I fire to keep my eye out for not getting for a big giant shadow coming overhead. So yeah. Now, Infinite Roleplay, what's going on there, man? Giants, depending on size, can be considered a type of environment. Hell yeah. Oh, that's what we're talking about. I mean, it can, if you wanted to, you could make giants so large that they are their own environment, that literally you cannot kill them. They are so large. I'm thinking large enough to have like clouds at chest level type of giants, that maybe even move so slowly that they are, they carry cities in their arms or on their shoulders, or in giant plates, or like Atlas carrying the planet on his back or something. And they could be moving across a vast plain, Plain, on a plane of their own, Plane. A plane of planes of such. Yeah, Tesla. Thank you very much, Tesla. God of War, or Shadow of the Colossus. Yeah, in God of War, there was literally a giant that was a dungeon, and we've seen that before in a number of games, where they'll make like a giant monster or worm that you go inside of, and all of its insides are a dungeon, whether you make them out of stone or something, or they are internal organs that the PCs can like run around inside of, whether to get sucked down in the lungs, flow with the blood, electrocuted in the brain, all that kind of good stuff, right? Acid in the the stomach and intestines, possibly, attacked by immune systems and whatnot. But yeah, Omen says I remember something like that in the Dante's Inferno game. Yeah, there are a number of role playing games. Circle of Gluttony, I think. Ooh, but yes, absolutely. You could, I mean, depending on how far size you ramp it up, the giants themselves might. What's the best way to say this? The giants them the giants as a humanoid figure might not be relevant. Like they might be so large that it's a matter of, you know, attacking them internally, or they happen to be a narrative in the background, and then they cause their own issues. Like, for example, the giants themselves could be the gods, and in your setting, the gods themselves could be battling each other on the planet. And so, if you were to stand far away enough, you could see what are essentially beings as large as the highest mountains, punching and slashing and throwing spells at each other, but their mere presence then causes other things, like their footsteps causing earthquakes. um, Zeus throws a lightning bolt, and all of a sudden, like, there's rumbling thunder everywhere, and rain starts to downpour or something. One of the gods gets a leg tripped and slammed to the ground, and all of a sudden it's like, the earth splits open, and like, you could actually have that in the background of your world, which is I'm with you, Pelora. Yeah, that's what I call my belt. The Circle of Gluttony. Hell yeah. I'm so with you. Oh man. Pelora says the trolls opening the gates to Mordor was cool too. Giant slaves. Yeah, and they, in the Lord of the Rings movies, over time they did do that, right? Where they had some types of giants under their employ. Um, in the beginning, I'm not sure if it was I think they called it a cave troll at the time, but there was the very first meeting where they try to slam the door shut, and they're attacked by goblins, I believe, and a cave troll, at least according to the movie Lord of the Rings. And it's got a big chain with a stone attached to it, and it could swing it around and such. So yeah, hell yeah. Thank you, Dead Man, for putting in its Wikipedia page for the Dante's Inferno game. Um, yeah, Pelorus goes on to say giant skeletons are always cool, and within the Ring of Fire, there's a city in the skull of a god. There sure is, in a desert of blue sand, I believe, after one of the gods fell to the earth. Which, when using giants, I mean, we brought up the idea of giants do not necessarily need to be, um, let's say, let's be kind and not, and they don't need to be idiots, right? They don't necessarily need to have loincloths and be Neanderthalic. They could have a high sense of culture. And we also, yesterday on Monster Monday, we talked about uh, the the events that could have taken place to limit their expansion, or reasons why they aren't as expansive and haven't taken over society amongst humanity. Although you could have a setting in which the humans, the smaller folk, are the minority in the world, and the giants have taken over everything, which would be pretty interesting, especially when you start talking about the sizes of doors, tables, stairs, ladders, clothing, weapons, and things that are like far too large for your average human being. And again, they become more obstacles than equipment. A sword that you can't pick up because it's like it's made out of iron or copper or steel, but it's like the length and weight of an iron girder. Like, it would take 6 strong humans just to be able to lift it off of someone if it fell on them. Would be kind of interesting. Although humans running around with like knives and forks might be a thing. I don't know. There are Mouse Guard and other games, there are games where you can play anthropomorphic animals, which are small. So I suppose if you wanted to go that far into playing something small against the giants, that could be a thing. Also, let's you know let's pull from something we already know. We human beings, what do we do when we need to grab a small child or a cat or a dog or swat at a fly or an insect or something? What do we do as human beings when those pests are around? Giants could be doing the exact same thing. If the humans are no larger than a fly, then the giants might just swat them away as if they're a nuisance and not directly attack them. They might just like swat their hand to move whatever it is buzzing in their ear, but they may not actually even consider them to be a threat at all. Now, I deign to say that if you fail to try to latch yourself onto the giant's neck, and the giant goes to swat at you for the second or third time, they might pick up themselves like an 80-foot fly swatter and smack the hell out of you. But that's a possibility as well. Even through the idea of being vulnerable to a gust of wind, because they just blow you, you're like a dust mote and they blow you away if you're that small. Now, if you start increasing the size where it's up there into the inches, or the size of a palm of your hand or something, or size of a mouse, hamster, small rodent sized creature, or small puppy or kitten, uh, they're going to have to pay attention to you quite a bit more. But again, a giant that takes off your cloak and throws it on top of you might be a pretty hazardous thing to be trapped by. Or a basket is thrown on top of you to try to trap you without killing you. Or even, what are some other things to do? Grabbing the human being by the cloak or the leg as they try to make their way and run away or something is a thing. So yeah, grappling by, I don't believe they do this, but when it comes to giants and grappling, I'm pretty sure while you may be small enough to like dodge out of the way, the minute you're grabbed, you probably are at a severe limitation without some pretty powerful arcane or psychic or magic or high tech help to get your ass out of being grabbed. But Pelor says harpoon guns strike me as a sensible way of dealing with a giant. Either try and tangle them up and bring them down, or to climb up the ropes. Really long pikes. You know what? Gulliver's Travels come to mind when you talk about harpoon guns, and that may be a logical way to entrap giants. Trip and fall, have them trip and fall, running numerous ropes or cables, or ropes to us, thin threads to them, and have them trip and fall after being maybe led through a tight location, or they've fallen asleep in their beds and the sheets are pulled down tight, or their shoelaces or boot laces are tied together to have them trip and fall. There's so many really kind of cool ways to deal with them, and maybe even causing distractions so that they attack each other. Like if the PCs are hiding on a dinner table and the giants are eating, and the PCs time it so that it looks like someone threw some food at them or kicked them under the table, or the PCs use a soccer field sized piece of parchment and write a big letter blaming or casting some kind of nasty words at the other giant, and one PC has to stand up on a very tall location yelling down at the other PCs like, no, 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 make the line longer, it's the letter T, you can't see it from here, but I'm telling you that's not what it's shaped like. That would be pretty impressive. And what a great way to yes, some of it is ridiculous, but that would be a pretty good way to have your PCs work together to achieve some sort of combined result, you know. Pelor goes on to say, chariots with harpoon guns on them. Ooh, shoot them in the leg and go around the legs, a la Star Wars AT-ATs. AT-ATs. Yeah. I was going to bring that up. I wasn't sure if bring up another Star Wars reference was a good thing, but since you brought it up first, I'm going to blame you. Yes, uh, the battle on Hoth, Luke Skywalker, and attacking the AT-ATs, the AT-ATs. That's a perfect example of something giant sized and not quite being able to take it down. It had They had to figure out where the weak point was, which was under the belly. Okay, makes pretty good sense. You have to watch out for and time your motion to its steps because they had a regular stride to them. They had a regular gait. So if your ship goes down or you're fighting an enemy or something, and a big shadow goes over top of you, you might have to want to scramble out of the way, or at least time it at some point, or keep it, like I said, have a rule where you have to either withhold an action to keep yourself disengaged from whatever's going on, or whatever the rules may be, and give it a resource cost or a timing cost or a saving throw type of cost to get the hell out the way. And there's also, remember, he also had to, Luke Skywalker had to use his magnetic grapple and lead his way up into the belly of the AT-AT, which they didn't even know it was there, and then throw in some kind of grenade to take the damn thing down. So it was a combination of a number of events before it happened. It wasn't just, I'm going to sit back far away and shoot this thing down. I've got to get up close, climb up into it, throw an explosive into it, and then have this thing, tumble the hell over. And I thought it was awesome. I'm only going to say the words vagina tentacles. Yeah. Yeah. If you want to combine some pretty nightmarish things, shrink us down, and all of a sudden, yeah, it could get pretty bad, especially when you start talking about nightmarish images and things of that nature. Yeah, heck yeah. Now, uh, other gamifiable things we might need to worry about in when it comes to giant-sized creatures versus your normal creatures are, how do you deal with interaction? So we got ourselves a bunch of combat, right? And based on the rules of the game, is it a one-for-one deal with human-sized weapons and attacks doing human-sized damage to the enemies, or will it rank up and down? I remember on one of our chats, someone made the suggestion of increasing and or decreasing the die type based on the increased size category. So if you follow me on this, something does a die 10. If you attack something that's one size category up, instead it does a die 8, and then as you keep moving up, die 8, die 6, die 4, or just one point of damage or something like that. Or you could go D3 or 1 and 2 if you want to. But of course, again, you have the argument that when you insert a house rule, there are those who are just going to be, completely against either the house rule or the implementation of it, like, oh, that's too much bookkeeping, which nearly every house rule implemented in the game, most people say, well, they default to too much bookkeeping. That's just a matter of exercising that muscle. If you're not doing too much math, it's not really bookkeeping. It's something that's out of the norm. That I think that's really what it devolves into. Now, I'm not saying that's the only rule you can use. No, 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 no. I'm saying that if you start using like multipliers or die types or something, if you really want to make the giants that much more threatening. So because in that instance with changing the dice, a fireball that does like 8d6 might instead do 8d4 to something one size category up, and then so on and so forth. Plur says, I just added hit points, seems the easier option. Yeah, and adding hit points, increasing armor classes, and you could even start to modify some of the giant creature types about their abilities, meaning like going all the way back to being picked up and thrown, being grappled, being stepped on. You could just reskin what they can already do, so if you have a giant that has a giant club, you just reskin the club as a stomp, or trying to slam you with a chair, or trying to drop a big old rock on top of you, or trying to hit you with its shield or something like that while you try to run away from it. So yeah, they could do that. Now, oh hey, Joseph Keenan. Joseph Keenan says, Joe Key says, few ways to do that: massive hit points or lower damage. Larger creatures, the thicker the skin and the fat layers, but the difference between taking down a rat dog and a killer whale. Yeah, be the difference between taking down a rat dog and a killer whale. Raise up the damage resistance. Yeah, uh, if if our role-playing games made it too complicated, we wouldn't want to use them in the first place. But at the same time, we also don't want to. We might be looking for our giants to be that much more difficult to essentially take down, as opposed to player characters just running into 24 giants that live in a home or a castle or something, and just start attacking them one by one. Then you get into there. For some, if it is, unless you're talking extremely cinematic, I'm talking like anime style. When you get away from that, some players might think of it like, I'm just feeling like a weird dissonance between us being 6 inches tall, one-shotting giants as we run through a dungeon. So you might have to have a talk with your players, or at least, if not a session zero, a trust amongst your players, or at least to explain to them openly and honestly that, hey guys, listen, this is going to be extremely difficult. You're not going to want to sit there and stand and go toe to toe with the giants in my world, or at least these specific giants in my world. Plura says, yeah, whale hunting is what got me into the harpoons. Don't know what other giant things we've dealt with before, aside from mammoths and ground sloths. I the harpoon spear exhaustion thing has been done plenty of times as well. Overwhelming numbers, lots of tribal folk that attack, say, elephants and other large creatures it's like a hit and run, so they'll use poison and spears and things, or blowguns or whatnot, and attack them, and then either run away because they're going to go berserk like a rhinoceros or something, or they will run towards you like a rhinoceros and be berserk, or run away from they run away from the creatures and allow them to bleed out, or track them down as the creature is overwhelmed, and then same thing, track them down. Bleeding out and exhaustion isn't really a thing in many role-playing games. Hit and run tactics tend not to be gameable statistically, unless you include them, in which case, again, as a dungeon master, game master, you might want to include that into the world, where even in our own world, there are hunters that will, they'll one-shot a deer, but the deer won't die for 40 minutes or something. So yeah, Polaris' poison is fine for killing, but not so fine when it comes to hunting. Absolutely. And we don't know, is it depending on the game setting, is there a paralytic that is powerful enough to go after them? I mean, would it take like 5 doses to take down a big giant versus a single dose for a human being? I don't know. Again, you get into semantics with certain things. Are certain spell effects more or less effective when it comes to giant-sized creatures, right? Someone casts I'm trying to think of something that's small, like, would it make sense for, say, someone's magic missile spell to have less effect on your 80-foot giants? Maybe, probably. Same thing with the fireball idea or the bolt of lightning or something like that. Again, with the higher hit points, you could, with simply just adding, a couple of hundred more hit points to these creatures, you could narratively just state that your effects are that much, less against them, which makes a lot of sense as well. Um, you know, um, I'll get into that in a minute, Poor. Joseph Keenan says flurry of arrows on a huge creature is like mosquitoes. The creature soaks up 75% damage on most attacks, but every third attack does normal damage. Damage, say a hit to a vital organ or a lucky shot. Yeah, armor class kind of works that way as well, where armor class is not whether you hit or miss, it's whether you're effective or not effective. So if you if you're ineffective against their armor class, the attack, you know, deflects off of their skin, or just it it pokes into the thick layer of fatty skin but doesn't do anything. I don't know. Yeah, you could do it that way as well. Um, and Polora asked me what the blue thing in the thumbnail is. I'm not sure where this photograph is taken from, but above and slightly to the left of my head, let's see if I could point my finger right. I'm pointing my finger up above me. That is, it looks like some kind of Tibetan styled statue and a blue, what would you call that? A blue skinned tusked warrior of some sort. They're actually holding a sword in their hands with the blade down, but you can't see me because I'm over top of it. I wonder if I could change my. There we go. Yeah, I am uncertain where it came from. I mean, let me take that back. I know where I got the image from, but the image didn't have any details on it. I use the I use a format that allows me to pick. Let me see. Oh, there we go. Maybe it's easier to see it that way. Yeah, I use a format that allows me to take images that are royalty free, and it just happened to be through a ton of images because there's not too many images for when you type in giants and titans and things. So yeah, that's where I went with that. I wish I knew where it was from because I saw a lot of the statues, and I'm wondering if they're all close together. Um, Deadman says it's from Japan and it's an oni. I I I, I won't just I won't argue with you on that one. There are a number of them, and many of them are painted very bright, vivid colors. So that's what drew me to it. Scott Post says Oni are serious monster manual inhabitants. I love Oni. I love them so much. They're like one of my top five go-to creatures because you can really reskin them. They're excellent combatants. They have arcane abilities, and they have a background that is not that common to use. So yeah, I like that. Zevron says I always use AC as hit. As hit, the target expends a resource to dodge or block a hit that would be dangerous. In the miss, the attack bounces off or is blocked casually. At 0 hit points, you have no resources to spend and get hit. Yes, uh, armor class and hit points are a very they are old bones with a lot of us in a new world. So it's behooves us to narratively explain how those things happen. Um, Two beings with the same armor class do not operate in the same manner. Some might be very quick, some might have very thick skin, others are heavily armored, even others might even have some sort of you could even describe it as having like a subtle arcane or psychic or technological ability to deflect harm from themselves, much like stabbing through the chest of a skeleton or zombie. It could be described as your weapon just pierces through them and does nothing to it when it gets hit, and you might not describe that the exact same way, through say a dragon turtle's shell, you know. So yeah, absolutely. And of course, you know, are hit points physical harm? Is it, like you said, a resource that you expend to avoid lethal a lethal hit until you are out of those resources? Is it more exhaustion until you are able to be hit in a vital area? I would say it's probably a little bit of all of the above. And no one person has to pick one system to go with one way. We're talking about giants, so I'm sure it would work differently with, say, these super massive giants, as opposed to, you know, humanoids against humanoids of the same or similar size, you know, medium creatures, which kind of bugs me with this fifth edition of Dungeons and Dragons. They're adding all these things, but they're um, they're daring you to, you say, Zevran says, stab through the heart and you're to blame. Darling, you give it Oni a bad name. Oh, well, hold on. You gotta do with the music though. Stab through the heart and you're to blame. Darling, you give Oni a bad name. I'm gonna get pinged by YouTube with that one. Think I didn't know that? You think I didn't know that? Get out of here. Whatever. Um, but anyway, uh, yeah. How do we deal with it? I don't know. Whatever. Also, you know, yeah, John Bon Jovi. Hell yeah. Oh man. Yeah, I know it's copyrighted. YouTube is like, no, no, no. We're gonna ding your video. No, bad streamer, bad. Uh, anyway, getting back to that being just going to our squirreliness. The gamifying giants and what they do and how they do them and such is can also present the problem of having like social interactions. You can go one direction where the Jack and the Beanstalk idea, and was it Disney that the giant stole a magical harp because he liked the harp was sentient, and she could strum her own strings and play music that would put the giant to sleep. But of course, the giant wouldn't let her get away, and so the the hero, Jack and et cetera, Jack and friends or whatever, have to get her. And I think the giant even had a giant bird cage, or I'm sorry, the giant had a bird cage that he could stick his captors inside of, which would be kind of a cool kind of prison to put the PCs in, that they're inside of a giant bird cage. And of course, that means that the birds inside of it, if there are still birds that exist in this world, are giant sized, like rocks or griffins, or I don't know, bloodhawks or rocks, ROCs or things like that. Oh, cool. Yeah, well, it's a party song. Come on now, Palora. I get it, but it's a thing, right? There are certain songs that are just they're just, you know, nod your head songs. Joseph Keenan says, like the way Savage Worlds handles things with being injured. It's not a tree chopping contest. Yeah, yeah. Some things get injured. They can again, narratively, when fighting giants, is there a difference between striking at their legs or arms than their torso or head? Many games don't, there's no difference between targeting those limbs, but allowing the players to target a specific limb, such as a player is grappled by a giant, and I'm going to strike their wrist or shoulder or something, or, you know, I'm going to put a bunch of arrows into their elbow to get them to flex their hand to let them loose. Will you allow that? Sure. Maybe you could do a called shot kind of thing. I didn't know that harp was the original story. I just remember seeing the animated version and figured they just added that in there to add another um, anthropomorphic being inside of it. I did not know that. Jack and the Beanstalk. Thank you, Deadman. Deadman threw in the Wikipedia link over in into the Discord. I appreciate that. I thought they just made up a bunch of that stuff. Honestly, considering I don't know the original story, but hmm. Uh, yeah, Keena goes on to say, Joe Key goes on to say, it get hurt. It affects your hits and damage, but also does the same for the bad guys. So sometimes we call it attrition or death spiral, and that's where a game system that as you take more damage and harm, you are less effective at dodging and or resisting things, and you have less ability to target and or harm your opponents. And so if you wanted to add in some form of attrition or death spiral, you could add that into the giants. If strike the giants on their ankles and knees and calves enough, and they go down to their knees, which would limit their ability to move and maybe reach or grab opponents or escape, and then that might make it easier to climb on top of their bodies and take them down, etc., etc. Much like going back to the idea of using harpoons and ropes and having them trip and fall, and then you're able to pile on the rabbit kind of thing. Pelor says, yeah, I don't like how if you roll damage and get a 4, the thing dies. If you roll a 3, they're going to deal with you at full strength. I think that's a reflection of a cinematic ideal that heroes, no matter how much they are hurt, tend to fight at their fullest. And I don't think they wanted to create, and Dungeons and Dragons has never made a separation between or a distinction between hit points and capabilities. So narratively, it's more like it's not that they're not going down. It's the harder you hit them, the stronger they're fighting you. So their strength offsets the harm. And I think you could make that the case for hit points and such. You could also make the case that like we said before, narratively, you maybe all of these attacks haven't struck true until you're able to strike that weak point or that particular part of the body, right? Because it's the assumption that hit points are toughness, and hit points are not necessarily toughness. Like Zevron says, it's a resource that is expended to avoid being hit by that one attack, right? So you do 4 damage, it goes down. You do 3 damage, you actually didn't do anything, but now its weakness is open, and all you need to do is one more point to hit him in that one spot, right in the throat or in the back or whatever the case might be. Omen says Pathfinder has it though. There's even an alternative way to use armor class in Pathfinder Unchained, such as converting armor points as damage reduction. Yeah, like I said, these are old bones being used in a new setting, much like a classic car uses an old, has old components in a world where things are far more advanced. And I think armor class and hit points are a result of that. Things have far moved past that. Pelor says Cypher has injuries. Within the Ring of Fire does a bunch. They sure do. And Joseph Keenan says GURPS has a bunch of add-ons for called shots and injuries, but combat is a lot more gritty to start with. Exactly. Dungeons and Dragons has always tended to bend towards the cinematic, and if you understand narratively how the game works, then you can start manipulating things from there. It is a classic Dungeons and Dragons, even the older, more lethal BX, first, second edition, even some third edition, or 3X versions could have been very lethal, but I would say that it tends towards the far more cinematic portion of it, and it takes a lot of hacking and or narrative suppositions between the players and the game master or dungeon master to say, hey, this is going to be more bloody, more gritty, and I'd like to have that. Although you could still do the same thing, you could just describe things differently. That's all. Without changing rules, you can just describe things differently and go at it like that. Joseph Keenan says, mutants and masterminds took the HPs in a slightly different way. Works good for supers, not sure for other games. Yeah, there are, much like White Wolf, and I remember D6 Star Wars and other games like that, where there aren't exactly hit points. It's more like, again, it's the death spiral, it's the attrition, it's more like damage levels. And as you suffer certain harm, you are just reduced to a particular damage level. And sometimes they even have names like stunned, bruised, wounded, fatigued, exhausted, comatose, whatever the case might be. And if you are knocked down one or more of those levels, you suffer whatever condition it is, whether they are Iron Omen says Iron Claw Furry RPG has similar rules. Yeah, and implementing them. Oh, okay. I did not know that. I've heard of Iron Claw. I've never played it though. But yeah, the maybe having some form of that. Now, mind you, you don't have to have that for the players. You could implement something like that for your giants, so that it gives the PCs have some incentive to target specific areas of a giant's body, instead of just randomly saying they have hit points. Meaning, follow me on this, attacking the head or torso may take them out faster, but their arms and legs might be still extremely as dangerous as they always are, as opposed to taking out their hands to prevent longer reaches and grappling and being smashed, and taking out their legs to prevent movement and being stomped on, right? And so you could possibly, instead of just giving them a like, this giant has 150 hit points, you could subdivide that down and go, okay, each arm and leg has 30. The torso, like, you don't have to be even with it either. Like, you don't have to take 150 and literally divide it between the body, but you could say, okay, arms and legs got 30, the chest has 100, the head is 50. Go for it. And then as one or more of those limbs are taken out, you struck him in the head. Okay, now he's blind or stunned, or deafened or something. You strike them in the chest. Okay, they're bleeding out, but they still can move at their same rate. They can still kick and grab things, and they can still hurt you with their hands as they're trying to crush one of your allies to death or something. Or, again, taking out the legs to keep them from being able to walk, falling to their knees, or have to drag their limb with them. Maybe instead of having two hands to swing and grab and crush people with, you take out a limb and only one hand, it's reduced to one attack at a time. And then maybe like one of the beefier PCs stands in front of that arm to become a target. So now this gives an opening for maybe a spellcaster or something to finally shoot that bolt into their eye or to the back of their head or something. So, and again, this would allow certain players to spotlight themselves. And are we going down a complicated route? Possibly. But if you intend on using giants in the first place, I don't see a problem with that. So yeah, we're thinking some other gamifiable things. Oh, social interactions. Sorry, got a little squirreled there a little bit. Yeah, the idea of a giant being manipulated by something that it has or wants or needs, is also a possibility as well. Meaning, like maybe it's unimpressed with the PCs and their weapons and puffing their shoulders out, but someone could have a very hypnotic voice, or be very entertaining to them, or maybe one or more of the PCs can heal, and they really request they're willing to parlay with the PCs because they're able to heal one of their loved ones, even though they are, these smaller folk or something. There's any number of things, whether the PCs are annoyances and they're usually just captured and thrown into cages, or flushed down the proverbial sewer whenever they come across the giant's headquarters. Or, oh, there's Ironclaw. Thank you, Deadman. Sanguine Games. There's also the idea that the giants, much like the the melodic um, the melodic harp in the Jack and the Beanstalk story, there is the idea that the there is an object, some external object for a fetch quest that the PCs can go after to then use that as a parlay tool for the Giants. So it could be chocolate, it could be a musical instrument, it could be a gemstone that can barely fit into a wagon. It could be certain spices for foods or something. Maybe there's something that needs to be a lost wedding ring that the only the PCs can grab that's the size of a very large vehicle tire or something when they grab it or whatnot. You know, it's a hula hoop size to the PCs, but to them it's very important. And so maybe there's something that could be. There are other missions other than attacking the Giants and the Giants attacking us. That's a possibility. And then yesterday we talked a lot about them. Giants being on the move or being limited in their scope, so the PCs may have other missions or gamifiable things for them to do, such as trying to save the life of a giant by mixing a concoction in a bowl that's the size of a giant swimming pool, or trying to use a mortar and pestle to crush up, giant-sized leaves that are the size of sheets and towels and stuff. Might be pretty interesting for the PCs to do that, So yeah. Hey, Pelora, have a great one. Have a great day. All right, speak to you. No, I will speak to you soon. Yeah, we are getting to our hour mark here. Definitely, we will be talking about this as we go along. World Building Wednesday is tomorrow, and definitely, absolutely, positively, definitely going to talk about worlds in which the giants are the primary factor that has shaped the world. During all of our world building days, that's what we really want to default towards. Of course, Third Pillar Thursdays talk about the environment and making giants, have giants become their own environmental effect, or at least create their own environmental effects as well, or turning the giants into the gods, where it's not about stopping them, or not stopping them directly. It's about surviving in a world in which they exist, and they walk upon the world in slow motion or something of that nature. So we'll do that. And lastly, on Future Friday, we're going to talk about giants, and definitely going to talk about Kaiju and Mecha. I'm probably going to add in some Kaiju for World Building Wednesday as well. But for Future Friday, that's definitely going to be a thing. Come on, there's a ton of mecha games. Hell, you want to go back all the way back to Mechton and the derivations thereof from Mike Pondsmith's Cyberpunk, based off of Art Talsorian Games, is a thing. And then you can go so many games, from miniatures to role-playing games, when it comes to being a pilot of a mecha. And then you can talk about their various sizes too. Are you a mecha pilot if you're playing in Robotech, where your motorcycle wraps around you? Or like, are you a mecha pilot if you're in something like Appleseed, where your arms and legs only extend to the knees and elbows of the mechanism you're inside of? Or are you thinking something even larger, where you're piloting in the chest or the head? So on and so forth. Neon Genesis Evangelion, although I like the pronunciation of Evangelion. But anyway, guys, we've gone to the hour mark, and it is bad weather here, so I'm going to have to leave pretty soon. I'm going to respond to a couple of these last comments, and then we get on out of here. So, yeah, but anyway, the last point about gamifying giants is the idea that you might, if you're going to use them and make them a major part of your world, I would suggest adding a couple more details in there, allowing the players to have a little bit more dynamic influence on them, whether it's like throwing a blanket over their heads and blinding them while somebody else tries to stab the giant in the chest, and leg tripping them, and poisoning them, the giant, with a thimble of a sleep potion where it's as large as a barrel for the PCs to have to produce or something like that. Those kind of things. So anyway, guys, have a great one. I really appreciate you guys spending your time with me. Your time is very valuable. I hope you're able to leave with a little bit of change. See ya. Bye.